Well, I think I can make a difference to the way the Isle of Man's governed. That's the main thing. I've been interested in politics for a long, long time. I've been involved in UK national politics, and I've been involved in Liberal Vannin for some time now, and chairman for this past year. So, with the general election coming up, this was an ideal opportunity for me to put my money where my mouth is and put my name forward.
What will you bring to the table? How will you play an active role rather than a sort of reactionary role in politics, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I live in Ayre Michael, so I live in Ballaugh. I've got a number of policy issues which I'll outline during the discussion and when I do my 2 minutes, and people can then judge me when my manifesto comes out, decide whether I'm the right person for Ayre Michael when they come to vote in September.
So do you see yourself as a local or a national politician?
Both. I'll be...
Can you be both?
Yes, of course. My first and foremost job will be to represent the interests of the people of Ayre Michael and the concerns they have in the constituency. But also all MHKs have to think about how the island's governed and be prepared and interested in what's going on in each department of government.
Now, you're, of course, a part of Liberal Vannin. Mm-hmm. How will their policies, how will the party's policies guide you? When people are voting for you, what are they going to see that's Liberal Vannin policy through you?
Well, we developed a set of guiding principles, which we published in January. So all members of Liberal Vannin, and especially our candidates, are signed up to those. We're discussing particular policies for this general election collectively, and we'll be issuing a Liberal Vannin manifesto as part of our individual manifestos when they're published later on in the summer.
So what are the key, you can give me a key policy or two now.
The key policy is jobs. We want to make sure that the island is recovering well from COVID and what we've endured over the last year to 18 months. Looking forward to an economic recovery next summer. I don't think there'll be a great deal before then.
So how will you and how will Liberal Vannin go about ensuring there is that economic recovery and there are jobs?
Yeah. Well, one thing we'll need to continue, I think, over the next 12 months to extend help to businesses that are still recovering from COVID and aren't having the number of visitors, for instance, this coming summer. So that there's that side of it.
Do you think we can afford to continue to do that?
I think we have to. I don't think there's a choice there. We can't let whole swathes of the economy just die out, and people have been struggling. They've been relying on savings to see them through. They can't carry on doing that indefinitely. So government does need to keep stepping in to help, particularly those in the tourist and hospitality sectors who've been hardest hit. And also sort of personal care people, sole traders, especially hairdressers who sole trading, have found it very difficult to keep the cash flows going.
Well, that's a sticking plaster. I suppose long term, how would you structure the economy?
Yeah, well, we have to try and attract more inward investment. I think the island and the UK and the world as a whole is having to step up to the plate now in terms of coming forward with measures to mitigate climate change. We want to make sure that there are jobs created on the island when we introduce measures for renewable energy, for instance, installing more EVs and preparing people for changing the way in which they heat their homes.
So on the climate change issue, how far and how fast will you go to accelerate that issue? Because there's been a lot of talk in this government, but I think we're on the cusp, and most people see it as the cusp of serious decisions going to have to be taken now.
Exactly. I mean, this government declared the emergency 2 years ago now. They commissioned the current report, but they appear to have sat on their hands a little bit since
So would you accelerate this?
I think whoever's in the next government will need to accelerate it. We in Liberal Vannin will be working with whoever else is elected as MHKs to put forward the best possible policies. We're not dashing into climate change mitigation measures. They have to be proportionate to bring people with us. And the Citizens Forum is one attempt to do that, to discuss with people across the population what measures they think are appropriate.
So you don't have any direct policies that you'd say, right, we've got an opportunity to bring these forward, let's push for these straight away?
Well, if we were in government and we had 24 MHKs, which we won't have, but if we were, then yes, we would be commissioning renewable energy generation straight away.
And what form do you think that should take? Because there's been a big question about how to replace Pulrose Power Station, and that's, I believe, 2035 is the expiry date. How do you see the mix energy-wise, and how do you see paying for it?
Yeah, the mix, I think, will be more renewables. I think we will need onshore wind turbines. There are a number of locations identified. We won't need them in all of those locations, so it'll be a question of environmental impact assessments.
And are you happy to back those, even if those in those areas don't want them there?
I think, yes, for the benefit of the whole island, then yes, we have to have some onshore wind turbines. We'll need to have some solar farms. Tidal energy would seem ideal for the island, but it's still a bit in its infancy, but we need to keep aware of developments there. I think we'll need eventually to expand the interconnector provision with the UK. The UK is moving towards more renewable, so the energy coming through the interconnector will be percentage-wise increasingly renewable sources. The gas-fired power station will need to continue for the rest of its natural life. It's how we replace that. And I think decisions will need to be taken probably in the next 5 years as to how we address that issue.
Well, I'd like to move to another issue that you've passed on to us as a priority. How are you going to fund Manx Care to ensure we have a first-rate health service going forward? Because that funding question still hasn't quite been solved.
No, it's been running over the last few years at a deficit and having to come back each year to get additional finance. The government, in setting up Manx Care, gave it some additional finance, but whether that's enough, I doubt it. And Manx Care have already come back and said, if you want to reduce waiting lists, we're going to need more money. I think that's the best approach, rather than Manx Care getting 2/3 of the way through its budget period and then saying we need more money and putting a gun to government's head. I think asking for specific funds for specific purposes that Tynwald can then properly consider is the way forward.
But do you not risk then, instead of leaving the operators to go ahead and crack on with these issues in the way they see fit, you're politicising it by having to continually go back to Tynwald on certain issues?
Well, that's up to Manx Care to highlight what they think are priorities and whether they do need extra resources. That decision is in their court. They then will need to come and ask for government assistance if they decide that's the way.
So we have to see how Manx Care progress. But what's your assessment of health services on the island? Do you think they're in a good position? Or?
I think we need to, like all jurisdictions, healthcare needs to be more resilient to deal with pandemics in the future. Hopefully we won't get one for a long, long time, but we must learn some lessons from the last 12 months. The main concern going forward is reducing the waiting lists, and Manx Care is also targeted with bringing health and social care together, and I think that's crucial. I think upfront money may well be required to make that happen.
Now, I have to ask you, we've mentioned climate change here, we're now on to health.
Yeah.
All of these items, they're requiring investment. The Treasury Minister has sought to borrow £400 million. We'll see if that comes to fruition. Can the Isle of Man government afford to be doing some of the things you're talking about? Where's that money going to come from?
There's a number of issues there. Money can be borrowed, as the Treasury Minister is attempting to do at the moment, again for specific purposes. We do have healthy reserves. We've shown that we can find resources when necessary for the COVID emergency. But we want to be working in partnership with private enterprise on the island. So not all of the money for climate change is going to come from government, nor all of the money for improving social care, healthcare for the elderly is going to come from government money. There'll be a mix of government and private. Government might have to lead the way in developing how it's all going to work together with the hospital, etc.
And what skills do you have that would help you do that within a government, should you be successful?
Well, I've worked for a long time in local authorities in the UK before coming to the island. I've worked at a fairly high level in local government in Scotland in particular, and I'm used to dealing with chief officers and politicians in setting budgets, achieving targets, project planning, etc. So I'm not saying I'm the world's expert at any of these things, but I do have an awareness and understanding, and I think I can bring that to bear if I'm elected.
Well, we've touched on some of the bigger national issues there. Have you any specific Ayre Michael issues that you are wanting to get to grips with should you be successful?
Mm-hmm. Well, one is roads.
The road through Kirk Michael, perhaps? Or?
The road through Kirk Michael is, it's being tackled at the moment, and we'll have to see what the effects of that are.
Are you happy with the proposed solution? Or?
It was put out to consultation in Kirk Michael, and most people seem to think that there's no ideal solution to Kirk Michael. It's a narrow road, there's narrow pavements, and there's not much you can do with it other than bypass the village. What's being proposed is to alleviate some of the choke points, and we'll just have to see how that works when the work is finished. I don't think there's any appetite for putting a big bypass around it at the moment.
Well, elsewhere in the constituency, what are your priorities?
To look at how the unused land in Derby and Andreas Airfield, for instance, can be best used.
What would you like to see? Because there have been many false dawns with the reuse of areas in Derby.
Yeah. Well, I think we need some more social housing in the area, and those are the best places for it.
Not a mix of housing. Some have suggested perhaps there needs to be different types of housing.
Yeah, I don't think the days of putting up social housing estates, I think, are long gone, and quite rightly. I think what we need is a mix of social housing within private development, so that people do naturally get on together, and they shouldn't be sort of isolated on housing schemes.
We have to talk about Liberal Vannin now. So you mentioned briefly some of the party's sort of core ideals. What kind of Liberal are you? What kind of Liberal would you describe yourself as? Because there is many interpretations of Liberal.
Well, I joined what was then the UK Liberal Party back in the mid-70s when David Steele was party leader, not long after the debacle with Jeremy Thorpe. But I was interested in the Young Liberals earlier than that, when Peter Hain was a leading light and campaigning against apartheid in South Africa. And those are sort of ideas that led me to feel that liberalism was the way for me.
Do you think
the mix of private enterprise, capitalism, and social care and tackling injustice where it appears is better than one extreme or the other on either side.
Do you think the public understand Liberal Vannin?
I'm hoping so. I think over the last 12 months, Michael Jersum and I have tried to expound Liberal views and Liberal policies and bring them to the fore. We're both different people in terms of our personalities. And
are your policies in any way different?
What, Michael's and mine?
Yours?
No. We come together and discuss issues, and we come to an agreed policy area. We've all got different, not just Michael and I, but Laurie and all of the members in Liberal Vannin have got different perspectives on how we should tackle issues facing the island. Well,
in the past, we have seen Liberal Vannin MHKs leave once they get into Parliament. What can you say to your constituents to assure them you're not going to do that?
All I can say is I have no intentions of doing so. I don't see any reason why I ever would. You can't ever say never, and the people who have left in the past may have well had good reasons for making the decisions they
Would you
had.
anticipate stepping down then as a result because you've changed the ticket?
Personally, yes. If I decide to leave Liberal Vannin, I would seek to stand again in a by-election. I think that's the right way. If you've been elected on a party ticket, then it's dishonest to the voters to then suddenly change tack.
I want to ask about if you were asked within government, if you were to become a departmental member, and I will ask, would you do that? Would you move away from Lib Van principles if a minister or council ministers were telling you it was in the national interest and you could weigh up the options, but the public couldn't? Would you consider departing from some of your principles?
In that situation, we would discuss it within the Liberal Vanning group in Tynwald and discuss it with our membership and come to an agreement, either to accept that it was in the national interest and change our policies accordingly. I don't think we'd change our principles ever, but policies and principles are different. Policies are a way of putting principles into practice, and there are many ways of doing that. So, but we may decided, that it was an ask that we weren't happy with, and leave government as a result.
Openness and transparency, another Liberal Vanning policy linked to the question we were talking about here. How committed are you to that, and what form does that commitment take?
Mm-hmm. We're very committed to it. We're dismayed at the shredding of letters. We're dismayed at the fallback on commercial confidentiality to get around not releasing information about how public money is spent. It's our money that's being spent. We have a right. Public scrutiny is important to make sure that money is being spent in the best interests of the people whose taxes are going into it.
Completely different change of attack now. Moving back to some of a big national issue that's quite acute at the moment, how would you go about improving the housing situation on the Isle of Man at the moment?
We've had in the past talk of a national housing strategy. It's been a bit of a talking shop. I think we need to get to grips with that. I think we could do with an all-island housing association that would maybe take over the role of maintaining and managing social housing
away from the local authorities,
from the DOI and from the local authorities.
So what would be the benefit?
I think to have one body that's looking after housing across the island that can make decisions on who should go into social housing in the first place, who should stay in social housing, what sort of social housing is required, and how, most importantly, maintaining them and bringing them up to standard for climate change requirements. Well,
that's a public sector issue there. Mm-hmm. What about the private sector where young people are struggling to buy homes and the cost of homes is going up?
Yeah, that's coming up on the doorstep all the time when I'm going around, that people are dismayed that their young family members are finding it so difficult to be able to afford a house on the island now. And the first-time buying scheme isn't really strong enough in our opinion, needs to be strengthened. We need to make sure that houses that are supplied through the first-time buying scheme stay available after the people who've initially bought them perhaps move on and sell and buy somewhere else, that those houses are reserved for first-time buyers and to keep that market going. And also, I think we do need to consider what happens in Jersey and Guernsey in terms of restricting the rights of people from off-island and even on-island to own multiple houses for buy-to-let.
Well, we're coming close to the end of our time, but I've got two more questions for you. Do you want to legalise recreational use of cannabis?
Our policy is that we should consult people on it. Personally, I think it should be at least decriminalised. I don't see any advantage in people having a criminal record for the personal use of cannabis, and even less the risk of going to prison. But it's something that hasn't been consulted on yet. We've had a consultation on growing hemp. We've had a consultation on growing medicinal cannabis and making medicinal cannabis available on the island, both of which had large majorities in favour. I don't know how the consultation would go on recreational cannabis. I don't think it would be as high as in favour as the medicinal cannabis, but I think it's something that should be put to the public.
And you have a minute left now. Why should the people of Ayre and Michael choose you in this upcoming election?
Because I think I have the best policies for the people of Ayre and Michael. I think we need a change in the way that the administration has behaved, and we need to have someone who will get a grip of project management on the island. We need to get people in power who will respond to the needs of residents of the island and not hide behind decision making.